All right, we'll say good morning. Good morning. Let us begin. Begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning. Should to thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Adar Aleph. To thank Mrs. Selma Wolf for dedicating all the Shemar Drushos this month with immense gratitude for the refuahs from Hashem and the merit of a refuah Shemar for all of those in need, and the schus of our brave soldiers, and the merit of Hashem and the schus of the return of our hostages. The Schwartzbaum family, in memory of Rabbi Aaron Schwartzbaum, Rav Aaron Yosef Ben Meir, Zichron Livracha, the Ziv, Levine, and Berman families, in memory of Mr. William Ziv, Zev Shmuel Ben Yisrael, Zichron Livracha, in the schus, Le'ili Nishmas, Staff Sergeant Rotem Shachar Hadar, who fell in battle yesterday. We dedicate, and another dedication that came in this morning, a really beautiful dedication, Dina Lieblich, in gratitude to Hashem for the safe return of her son Aaron Daniel Ben Fruma Dina and his pluga from Gaza. Mishe Gamalcha Katuv Hui Gamalcha Katuv Sela. Truly incredible. Let's say what days we are living in. What days we are living in to see a mother dedicating a shir to thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu for the safe return of her child. How much we have to recognize and how much we have to appreciate the overwhelming and awesome Mesiras Nefesh. You know, we think about the Mesiras Nefesh of the soldiers. It's also important for us to recognize the Mesiras Nefesh of the parents. To say goodbye to your child as your child goes into battle, not knowing Ma Yavo Yom, what the day is going to bring. And the only reason a parent does that is because they believe in the cause of Am Yisrael, the cause of Eretz Yisrael, the cause of the continuity of our people. Absolutely overwhelming. Absolutely overwhelming. We are so happy that Baruch Hashem, this precious soldier, is back with his family in Halabai. Emirat Hashem, all of our soldiers should be successful in their missions, and Emirat Hashem should come back to their families b'shalom and b'karov. And of course, we dedicate all of Meseches Bava Kamma Le'ilui Nishmas, Master Sergeant Yomi Charusha Shemikom Damo. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, his neshama will have an aliyah, and the family in Nechama. But let's say with that, let us begin. So today's daf is Kuf Vav 106, and we are picking up Emirat Hashem on Kuf He. We've got a lot to do today, so let's bend our shoulder. I'm sorry. Meretz Hashem. Good. Right. Tomorrow we have a short Amud Aleph at least, so it's a little bit easier. He'll say, so let's. I'm sorry. Yeah, I know. All right. So let's bend our shoulders, Meretz Hashem, and get to work. So I'll say. So we are picking up. Atam Chartali. So in the wide lines, it is 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 lines in. Literally first word on the line. And this, I think, around there, right where we stop. So remember again, we're focusing over here on a statement of Rav Amram, and Rav Amram had this interesting idea that v'kichesh ba prat lamode be'ikar. So we'll say that halacha l'maisa, there is only liability for theft, or for that matter, again, a false oath. We'll talk about theft. When halacha l'maisa, the thief tried to deprive the owner of something, but in a situation where the individual admitted that the true owner was the owner, there wouldn't be liability in that case. So, for example, remember again the cases that we saw yesterday. Shimon goes over to Ruvain, says, Ruvain, why you stole my cow? And Ruvain says, Chas v'shalom, I didn't steal your cow. So Shimon says, that's interesting because the cow is in your backyard, right? So explain that to me. And again, we went through a whole list of things. I'm a shomer sachar, I'm a shomer chinam, I'm a shoel. You sold it to me, your father sold it to me. So interestingly enough, in all of these cases, Ruvain is admitting, it's your cow. I'm not trying to. So I'll say, so if Amram wanted to suggest that in these kind of cases, there would not be liability. So we're now just trying to go through the cases and see how they pan out. So Atam Achartali, my mode be'ikar. So I'll say, so again, when Reuven says to Shimon, you sold it to me. So I don't know, that sounds like Reuven is trying to retain ownership. So ultimately, again, what mode be'ikar? How is that a case where Reuven is admitting that Shimon is the owner? So the Gemara says, Lo tzricha da'amrei lo nasati l'chadami shakel tu sivzil. It's where Reuven says, you know what, you sold it to me, but I realized I never paid for it. Right? Interesting how confrontation jogs your memory a little bit, right? So in other words, I realized I never paid for it. Here, take it back. All right. You gave it to me. Your father gave it to me. So we'll say, what admission is there by Reuven? that Shimon is the owner. Because the truth is, you gave it to me on the condition that I would do something for you, and I realized, ultimately, I never did anything good for you. Shakil turcha v'zil. Take your cow, take your ox, and go. All right, so we'll say, what about in the case where Ruvain claims? We'll say this is another one of the claims. Ruvain claims that I found your cow wandering around, so I brought it home with me. Why can't Shimon say, Lema ibaylecha ladure? Okay. By the way, Ruvain, the way it works with lost objects is, if you find it, generally the goal is to try to find the owner and return it. So yet it's sitting here in your yard. Amar Avud Shmuel, ba'omer shvua. I swear that I found a lost object. I didn't know it was yours. I didn't know it was yours. So Reuven is claiming, of course, I would have returned the object had I known ultimately again who it belongs to. So time we have a brayso. Sorry, just working. Okay, so time we have a brayso. Amr Ben Azai, so Ben Azai says as follows: Gimel Shavuosein. There are three different cases of Shuvah. And I will say, what are we referring to over here? Take a quick look at Rashi. So Rashi says, Shalosh Shavuosein be'edus aveda. So what we're talking about over here, where halacha l'maisa, a person swearing regarding a lost object. So now watch this. I'm reading Rashi. Sheshbia es ha'ed imra isa es avedasi va'amar lo v'achar kach choda. So we'll say, here's the case. Shimon goes over to Ruvain. Shimon says, Ruvain, I lost my object. I'm pretty sure that you have information about it. And Ruvain responds, I don't. Shimon makes him take a shvuah. And Ruvain swears that he has no information regarding a lost object. Then what happens? He admits that he does. So I'll say, so this is kind of like almost like a type of shvuah sa'edos type of situation where halacha l'maisa, someone could impose a shvuah upon you that you have information. That you have information. So I'll say, so Gimel Shvuah say, so what are they? So again, Ruvain swears, I have no knowledge of your lost object. And then ultimately he admits. What does he admit? Hikir ba v'lo b'motza. He knows about the object, but he doesn't know who found it. B'motza v'lo ba. Or he knows about who found it, but not about the object. Lo ba v'lo b'motza. Or he doesn't know anything about the object or about someone who found it. Now both say, lo ba v'lo b'motza. If he doesn't know about the object or who found it, then kushta ishtaba. Then both say, then he's swearing truthfully, right? Because what is he swearing? He's swearing, I have no information regarding this object. Well, the truth is, if he doesn't know about the object, he doesn't know about the person, then that is a truthful oath. Ema ba'u b'motza. Now, the cases where he knows both about the object and about the person who found it. So the Gemara said, I don't understand what's the ramification over here. So Rav Ami obviously the Gemara said, Rav Ami Rabbi Chanina liftar, ultimately again to exempt himself from liability. Shmuel says to create liability, or beplukta dahani tanoi. And both say in reality, this is the following machlokes. And both say this is actually interesting. Disanya. Right, it says as follows: Hamashbia eid echad. Both say, let's say you go ahead and you cause an eid echad, one witness, to go ahead and take an oath. Take an oath. So the Gemara says, so what's the halacha? Hamashbia eid echad pater. Ultimately, again, he'll be pater. And both say, now take a look for a moment. Take a look at Rashi. Almost right across in Rashi. So we'll say, so Shimon goes over to Ruvain. He says, Ruvain, you have a testimony that could impact me, whatever the testimony is. Right? Ruvain says, I know nothing. So we'll say, so ultimately again, so we'll say, this is shvuah sa'idos. I swear, I don't have any testimony that could impact you. And I will say, now look at Rashi. Pater, ha'ed mikarban shvuah sa'idos, the ha'i havimasid le lo havimechayev lehech el shvuah. The afagav the ikal meimar dilma lo mishtaba go in the mamon pater. Fine, I'm going to suppose say now watch this. So we'll say, so now I go over to an eid echad. I say Ruvain. So let me keep it simple. Shimon goes over to Ruvain. Ruvain, you have testimony that can impact me. Ruvain says, no, I don't, and I swear that I don't. It turns out that what? Ruvain does no testimony that impacts me. So we'll say Ruvain is pater from shvuah liability. Why is he pater from shul liability? They will say, what's the most that an Eid Echad could do? What's the most that an Eid Echad could do? An Eid Echad could trigger a Shavua. So therefore again, first opinion says, Eid Echad is pater. Rabbi Shmuel says, no, an Eid Echad who lies and says that he doesn't know Eidus, when in fact he does have Eidus, ultimately again is going to be chayiv. I b'may kamiflagi. So we'll say, what are they arguing about? Somar savar davar hagar l'mamon ki mamon dami. So we'll say, one opinion says that we'll say that halacha l'maisa. We've seen this so many times before. Davar hagar l'mamon ki mamon dami. Something that could cause monetary obligation has ultimately again the status of mammon. So we'll say, for example, an Eid Echad could generate the Shavua. Shavua itself ultimately again could push the hand of someone to go out and pay. And the other opinion says no, that Davar Hagar on the mammon is not ki mamon dami. Okay. Amar Rav Sheshes. Rav Sheshes says as follows: Hakofer bepikadon na'asa alav gazlan. The chai bones. I suppose this is an interesting case over here. Shimon deposited an object with Ruvain, a pikadon. Right? What's the goal of depositing an object? So the goal is that the person watches over it. Now what happens? At this point over here, Ruvain goes ahead and claims he doesn't have the pikadon. He doesn't have it. He returns it to Shimon. He doesn't have it. And what happens? Eidim come, Rashi points out over here, Eidim come and say, yes, you do. So what's the halacha? Na'asa alav gazlan. So ultimately now Ruvain is considered to be a thief. The chayiv ba'onsin, and therefore again he's chayiv in complete liability. Rashi says over here, Nasa alav gazlan, the last short line, first white line in Rashi. He says mishas kfira v'af agav shelo nishba umikan ve'elech ein lo din d'shomer chinam ela chayiv ba'onsin miyenas. We're saying, and here's what's interesting. Bless you. Here's what's interesting. What Rav Sheshes is saying is like this. The moment that Ruvain denies the pikadon, he becomes a gazlan. The moment you become a gazlan, remember again, a gazlan is chayiv, has complete liability and responsibility for the object. Now what's unique over here? He didn't take a shavua, right? Ruvain has not sworn about anything. He's just making a claim, I don't have your pikadon. Then witnesses come and say, yes, you do have the pikadon. Ruvain has complete liability for anything that happens over the object. V'tanatu, now a brayso that supports this. V'ki cheshba, lamadnu onesh. So what's a v'ki cheshba? He denies that he has the object. So the Torah tells us that now he's liable. So the Gemara says, lamadnu onesh. I now know about the punishment. Ashara minayin. From where do I see ultimately again the warning in the Torah? Talmud lomar lo sechachashu. My lav lo onesh mamon. Is that not coming to teach me financial responsibility? Lo the onesh shavua. Nobody says it's going to teach me responsibility. Ultimately again that halacha l'maisa, if he swears falsely. Hamid diktani seifa, but look at the seifa, the ishtaba. So Rabbi say the seifa is a case where he swears. Michlal dereisha delo ishtaba. We would infer from that the dereisha is a case where he doesn't swear. Diktani seifa, v'nishba al shaker. He swears falsely. Lamadnu onesh. So Rabbi say now I know that there's a responsibility. As haraminayin. From where do I know ultimately again about the warning? Talmud lomar lo seshakru. Torah says, do not lie. We made the seifa dishtaba, and since the seifa is talking about a case where he swore falsely, reisha de lo ishtaba. We'll say it makes sense to vary the cases, and therefore the reisha case would be a case where he didn't swear falsely. Amri idi v'idi dishtaba. Both are cases where he swore falsely. Kan shahoda, kan shabo edim. So we'll say one is talking about a case where the shomer himself admitted that he swore falsely. The other is a case ultimately again where witnesses came along. Kan shabo edim. Asu edim chay ba'onsin. If edim come along and say that in fact he did have the pikadon, at that moment he becomes chayiv, full responsibility for onsin. Aduye odi chayiv bekeren v'chomesh v'asham. If he admits that he swore falsely, that generates the general liability that we spoke about before for a false oath. When you swear falsely, 3 prime liability, principal keren, chomesh additional 5th, and carbon asham. Okay, so we'll say, so just to point out over here, the Gemara is espousing a very interesting principle, that essentially, if Ruvain is entrusted with watching the object of Shimon, and now Shimon comes to collect the object, and Ruvain denies any knowledge of the object, and witnesses come, and at that point, Ruvain becomes a gazlan. becomes a gazlan, becomes a thief. And as a thief, just like any other thief, a thief assumes full responsibility for the object. In other words, Rabbi say, what the Gemara is pointing out, Rav Sheshes is pointing out is, as a shomer, I have limited liability. Now, obviously, it depends what kind of shomer you are. Are you a paid custodian, unpaid custodian, a borrower? But every one of these shomrim has some cap on his liability. What Rav Sheshes is introducing us to is the moment you become a thief assumes full responsibility. In other words, what is the Gemara highlighting? What the Gemara is highlighting, I will say, is that I would have thought that perhaps when I am entrusted with an object and now I steal it, okay, essentially, what's my status, what's my relationship vis-a-vis that object? The same relationship I had before. So if I'm a shomer chinam, I'm an unpaid custodian, and now again, Reuven comes over to me and he says, give me back my object. I say, I don't have it. And it turns out that I stole it. Okay, I'm responsible, but what am I responsible as? What am I responsible as? As a shomer chinam, right? In the same way that I was responsible up until now. Kamma says, no, that's not the way it works. Once you become a thief, then by definition, your relationship with the object fundamentally changes, and now you have complete responsibility. Whereas before, you had limited responsibility. Now, once you've effectively stolen it, you take on full responsibility. An incredible yesod. Incredible. So I'll say, it's also a tremendous life yesod that, in life, when you make mistakes, so sometimes we think that, okay, I made a mistake, and I move on. When you make a mistake, a person is responsible for all of the fallout of that mistake. That's the way life works. You make a wrong turn, you make a wrong decision, you make a poor decision, okay, I'm now responsible again for the ripple effects of that. That's on me. I didn't mean to do what I did. Understood, but at the end of the day, Adam Mu'ad person is responsible. The same way over here, right? Reuven steals the object, you order Shomer Chinam, now for responsibility. I make poor decisions in life, I bear the responsibility for the ripple effects of those decisions as well. Incredible yisod. Let's go back there. Massive Rabbi Bar Kamma, Shekinegdo Chashal Shvuah Ketzad. Shabbos say this is actually a fascinating case. The case of Shekinegdo Chashal Shvuah. What's the case of Shekinegdo? Shabbos say, listen to this. This is really interesting. Let's say again, Reuven and Shimon are having a legal dispute. So for example, Shimon deposited an object with Shimon, or whatever the case may be. Shimon has a claim on Reuven. Reuven now has to swear. Let's say Reuven is what we call chashad ala shvuah. Chashad ala shvuah is Reuven is a man of compromised integrity. As a result of his compromised integrity, he's integrity challenged, right? As a result, ultimately, again, of his compromised integrity, what happens? Beis Din won't let him swear. There are people like that. I will say, which is Beis Din won't let him swear. Why? He doesn't have credibility. So we'll say, so the way it works is, when you are locked in litigation with someone who is integrity compromised and therefore can't swear, we flip the shvuah onto the other party. Which actually is a benefit. So now Shimon is in a legal dispute. If you look at Rashi, by the way, look at Rashi. It's 6 lines up from the bottom. We'll get to this in one day. Gabi ve'elu nishba'in v'notlin tezeh echad mehen mi shehayelo chavero chayiv al shvuas hashvua v'uchashad al hashvua shenimtza shakran b'shvua so shekinegdo nishba v'notel. So we'll say, so in any case where Reuven and Shimon are locked in litigation and Reuven is supposed to swear but he can't because he is integrity compromised, we flip the shvua and we have Shimon swear. We have Shimon swear, and that's how Shimon's able to resolve the situation. So says the Gemara, massive, Rabbi Rachama. So what's the case? Echad shvuas ha'edus, v'echad shvuas ha'pikadon, v'afilu shvuas shav. So Rabbi said, you could become integrity compromised in a variety of ways. A person took a false oath regarding testimony. Let's say again, in a different case, Shimon had come over to Reuven. Reuven, you have testimony for me. Reuven swears that he doesn't, and it turns out that he lied. Or shvuas ha'pikadon, Shimon deposited an object with Reuven, said, Reuven, you have my object. Reuven says, no, I don't, and he swore, and he lied. Or shvuas shav, stam, Reuven took a false oath. Reuven swore that table is a coffee maker. That's a shvuah shav, right? So ultimately, again, any of those cases, he's now chashid, he's now suspect, and at the end of the day, He can't swear. So were he to be locked in litigation, we'd have to put the shvua on the other party. So the Gemara says, Vim Isa. Now, if what we said before is true, Bikfiruhu the Ifsaleh. Now, we'll say, if Rav Sheshes says you're right, that the moment you deny responsibility for a pikadon, you effectively become a thief, then ultimately, again, once Ruvain denied that he had the pikadon, even if Ruvain never swore, he should be integrity compromised and never able to swear again, or at least until he does shuvah. What's the case over here? The Kaiba Agam. No. When Ruvain went ahead and he said that he didn't have the pikadon, he wasn't really trying to steal. What was he doing? The animal itself was in the marsh. Ba'agam. It was in the marsh, in the swamps. The lav kfirahu. He wasn't really trying to steal the object. So what was he doing? The savar ishtamitna le ad azilna umaisina le. He was going to give back the object, but because it was far away, he wanted to buy himself some time. Right? So his intention was to go ahead and collect the animal from the swamp and get it back to Shimon. The only reason he claimed that he didn't have it was to buy himself some time. So Gemara says, listen to this case. If you deny a loan, you deny that you owe someone money, that doesn't make you integrity compromised. Wow, right? So I go over to Ruvain and say, Ruvain, you owe me $10,000. Ruvain says, no, I don't. No, I don't. Ultimately, again, that does not go ahead and render him unable to give eidos. Now, we'll say, I don't know. That sounds like he's a liar. He shouldn't. So why? What's the pshat? We'll say top of kuvav. Bepikadon pasal eidos. We'll say now. What's the logic? What's the logic? The logic is that we view Ruvain. Sometimes we'll say when people claim that they don't owe money, it's not that they don't plan on paying back. It's just what are they trying to do? Buy themselves a little bit of time. Now, I will say and especially why does this apply to a loan? Because since by loan, when you loan someone money, the understanding is that they have the ability to utilize that money. They're just trying to buy themselves time. So I will say also a tremendous yisod. There's sometimes when people do bad things, they're not really trying to do bad things. Amazingly enough, they're trying somehow to accomplish something good. They're just going about it in all the wrong ways. But it's like top of kovav, but because on pasal eidos. However, if somebody denies that they have a deposit, then they are pasal eidos. Because remember, again, a deposit is just that. What's my job with a deposit? To just watch it. What's not my job in a deposit? To use it. So therefore, again, my goal is to watch it and to give it back. Therefore, if you deny a deposit, ultimately, again, you are pasal eidos. V'amar Ilfa said, Shvua Kona. I will say, but Ilfa said that Allah, so once I go ahead and I swear falsely, right, I acquire the object for liability purposes. Shvua hi dekanya. It's only a shvua ultimately that acquires the object for you. Aval kfira lo. But I will say, but again, denying that you owe it does not. So what's the case over here? The Kamma ba'agam, where the object in question again is in a faraway place, and therefore I'm just trying to buy myself time. When I deny the object, I'm not really trying to steal it. I'm just trying to buy myself a little bit of time. The other possibility is my shvua kona. What does it mean when we say that a shvua, false oath, acquires the object? For me, Kid Rav Huna, Dam Rav Huna Amarav, Marali biyadecha. So I'll say, listen to this interesting case, right? Shimon goes over to Ruvain. Ruvain, you owe me money. Marali biyadecha. Vala omer ein lecha biyadi. And ultimately, Ruvain says, I have nothing. I don't ever have anything of yours. Vinishba. And then Ruvain swears v'yachar kach bo edin. And then witnesses come. Oh, so it says, you know what? The jig is up, right? Ruvain lied. Witnesses come and say that he owes money. Listen to this. Potter. What? Potter. Ruvain's going to be Potter. Why? This is incredible. Shenemar v'lakach ba'alav v'lo yishalim. So we'll say kevan shekiblu abaylim shvua shuv ein mishalim mama. So we'll say the Gemara darshes the pasuk v'lakach ba'alav v'lo yishalim. Literally, the owners will take and not pay, and he will not pay. Once the owners accept shvua, that is in lieu of any financial liability. In other words, when you make a claim against someone, essentially you're going to get one of two things. Either you're going to get your money back, or you're going to get a shvua. But once a shvua is proffered, is that the right word? Do you proffer a shvua, right? Once a shvua is proffered, then ultimately, again, the case is done. The case is done, and there is no longer any liability. I will say an overwhelming no, absolutely overwhelming statement. So I will say, so there are two things coming out over here. So first of all, I will say, just keep in mind the statement of Rav Sheshes, right? This whole thing began with Rav Sheshes, really quite amazing. And Rav Sheshes tells us that that once a person is kofer b'pikadon, right? Once a person ultimately again says, I don't have the pikadon, he becomes a gazlan. Now what's the impact? Now that doesn't sound like such a great chiddush, right? Okay, right. Reuven's denying that he has Shimon's object. So what else is he? He's not a good guy, right? So therefore, again, he's got to be a gazlan. The chiddush that Rav Sheshes is introducing is that even without a shvua to that effect, he becomes a gazlan, and therefore, as a gazlan, he has complete responsibility over the object. So no matter what his relationship to the object was before Shomer Chinam, Shomer Sachar, Shoel, you now change the playing field. You now you stole it. Once you stole it, you now become responsible like a thief, which is complete liability, complete responsibility, even without the shvua. Okay? The other statement now is a statement of Rav. So the two major halachic statements. The other statement of Rav, which is that ultimately, again, if Shimon deposited money with Reuven, comes to get his pikada back from Reuven. Reuven says, I don't know what you're talking about, I don't have your object, or I return your object, whatever it is, and he swears to that effect. He swears to that. Now I'll say this is not a case of admission after the fact. He swears. Witnesses come and say, Reuven, Shimon did give you a pikadon. So we'll say, what is the halacha in that case? Rav says, case is closed. Case is closed. Once Reuven went ahead and the owners either get the pikadon or a shvua. And once you get the shvua, that's it. There's no more liability after that. So we'll say, let's analyze that a little bit more. So Gufa Amrav Huna Amarav, Manali Biyadecha. Shimon goes to Reuven, you owe me money. Reuven says, I have nothing of yours, v'nishba. And Reuven swears to that effect. Ubo edim. So remember again, beforehand we were talking about cases, our Mishnah was talking about cases of Hoda, where Reuven swore falsely and then admitted. Remember, in these cases, there's no Hoda. There's no Hoda. Reuven swears falsely and witnesses come afterwards. Uba edim pater. Reuven's going to be pater. Why? Shneimar velakach ba'alav velo yishalim. The owners received it and will not pay. Kevan shekiblu bailim shvua. Once the owners receive a shvua, shuv ein mishalmin mamon. Reuven is no longer obligated to pay any money. We'll say what an incredible idea. So Rava says, okay, let's analyze this a bit. Mistabra milsei derad b'milva. This case seems to make sense in a case of a loan. Because we will say by a loan, remember again, the principal concept by a loan is milva lahotza nitna. That a loan itself, when you loan someone money, that loan becomes the property of the borrower. It really becomes his. The Gemara says, Ava pikadon b'shusei demarikai. But this concept should not apply. So we'll say, so in other words, with a loan, the loan money becomes the property of the borrower, and then when he swears, that frees him from liability to pay back. However, pikadon, I will say, pikadon b'shusei demarikai, but a pikadon, I will say, forever remains. The whole thing of a deposit is essentially, I'm giving something to someone to watch for me, but at no point in time is there any relinquishment of ownership. So I will say, you hear the distinction? When you lend someone money, that money is theirs. That money is theirs. They could do whatever they want with it. I don't have any ownership over that money. What I'm entitled to is repayment at a certain date. So therefore, I can hear the logic that says, therefore, when Shimon goes over to Reuven, give me back my money, Reuven says, I don't have your money, or you never lent me money. And he swears, so you either get an oath or you get your money. Those are the two things. So therefore, by taking the oath, he exempts himself from repayment. But Lamaisa, when it comes to Pikadon remains the property of the owner the entire time. I never give up ownership over my Pikadon. I'm giving it to someone to watch. But even when he's watching it, it's mine. So why should an oath exempt Reuven from having to pay back the object? To which the Gemara says, V'alokim. So Rabbi saying, by God, it's like a shvua. V'alokim, Amar Rav, afilu pikadon. But Rav said no. Rav said this concept applies even by pikadon, which is pretty amazing. The chi kasiv kra pikadon ksiv. Because interestingly enough, the pasuk itself is written in the context of pikadon. So it's a very interesting problem we have over here. So Yasser of Nachman, the Kamma Hashmaita. So Rav Nachman was sitting and saying over this ruling. Isvei Rav Acha Bar Mimri. Rav Nachman Yomi heard this, and he raised the following kasha. Listen to this. Heichan pikdoni. So where is my pikadon? Shimon goes over to Reuven. Reuven, give me back my pikadon. Right? Where is my pikadon? First wide line. Amar le avad. Reuven says, I'm so sorry, it was lost. Sorry for your loss. Amar mashbiachani. So Shimon says, okay, let's just take a shvu on this, right? I adjure you to go ahead and swear that you lost, that the object was lost. I will say, now remember again, depending on the type of shomer that Reuven is, so loss could be a valid claim of exemption. So Hashiachani va'amar amen, and Reuven says, yep, I swear. So what happened? Va'idin also sha'achlo. So I say, what happens? Witnesses show up and they say, no, the sheep wasn't lost. Reuven just had a fantastic dinner, right? So the sheep was not lost at all. So the Gemara says, so what's the halacha? Ultimately, again, Reuven has the payback principle. Hoda me'atzmo. What happens if Reuven admits of his own volition that he ate the animal? Then what's the halacha? Karen v'chomesh v'asham. Shabbos says halacha l'maisa. He has to pay back Karen, chomesh, and asham. Right? Principal, additional fifth, and bring a carbon asham. Now what's unique about this case? This is a case of where he swore. Shabbos said this seems to contradict Rav, because Rav said before that what? That if ultimately again an individual goes ahead, right? Reuven goes to Shimon. Shimon goes to Reuven. Reuven, give me back my money. Reuven says, I'm sorry, I don't have it. And Reuven swears, once you take an oath frees Reuven from liability. But here is a case of an oath, right? Reuven swears he doesn't have the animal, and then ultimately again he admits that he does have the animal, and halacha l'maisa again is chayiv in karen chomesh and asham. What does that show you? That even after an oath, there could be financial liability. Contradicts Rav. Rav Nachman, how come I ask? No. What's the case over here? Kigon shenishba chutz lebezdin. Interesting. The case over here is where Reuven took his oath outside of Beis Din. Now I will say, an oath outside of Beis Din, Rashi points out, is not strong enough to exempt you from monetary obligation. In other words, when Rav said his statement that when you swear you are exempted from any further payment, that is an oath in Beis Din. An oath out of Beis Din is not the same. I will say, wherein lies the distinction between an oath in Beis Din and an oath out of Beis Din? An oath in Beis Din usually requires nikitas chayfetz. You're holding on to like a Sefer Torah. That's what makes it big stuff. Right? So the Maisa, again, when Rav says that an oath frees the person, the swearer from further financial liability, that's an oath in Beis Din. The case over here that we just mentioned, where even after an oath you're going to be chayiv in financial liability, that's an oath outside of Beis Din. Amarle. Okay, let's go with this. Amarle ihachi ema seifa. Look at the end. Look at the end of this case. Heichan pikdoni. Shimon comes over to Reuven. Reuven, where's my pikadon? Amarlo nignav. And Reuven says, I'm so sorry, it was stolen. Mashbiachani. Shimon says, okay, let's take a shvua about that. Right? Va'amar amen. And Reuven takes a shvua. Va'idim idin also sheganvo. And witnesses come along and say, testify. We'll say this is not a case of hoda. So in this case over here, Reuven is not admitting. Right? In this case, witnesses come along and say, Reuven, you went ahead and you stole it. Mishalim tashlume kefel. Ultimately, Reuven has to pay kefel like a ganav. Hodami atzmo. I have Reuven in the midst of his own volition. The mishalim karen v'chomesh v'asham. Then he has to pay back again, principal, fifth, and a carbon asham. Now let's analyze this. Chutz lebeis din. Now let's say we're talking about a case of a shvua outside of Beis Din. Mi'ika kefel. We'll say kefel is a monetary judgment administered by Beis Din. So if we're talking about a shvua taken outside of Beis Din, and now witnesses come, I don't understand why would it be chayiv kefel. Amarle, so he responded back to him. That's incredible. Amarle, yachilno l'shanu l'chareisha chutz lebeis din v'seifa bebeis din. I could answer it up, and I can answer it up that the Reisha is talking about a case of outside of Beis Din, and the Seifa is about a case in Beis Din. Mihu shinuya dechika lo mishanina lacha. But I don't want to give you a forced answer. I'll give you a forced answer. But I will tell you that this is such an incredible idea. You know, the Gemara Masechah Shabbos, I've quoted this many times, says, "Lamad lashon chalomar eini yodeya." Teach your tongue to say, "I don't know." Right? Why? Because for many of us, it is so hard to say, "I don't know." Instead, what do we often do? We often give shinuya dechika. I give answers that are not really good answers. Not really good answers. Why? Because it's hard for many of us to say, I don't know, or I don't have an answer. So sometimes, I'm not going to say we make stuff up, but lamaisa, we give answers that aren't really answers. So I'll say, so the Gemara, it's so profound over here when you see an example of this, where like the Tana says, I could give you an answer, but I know in my heart it's not a good answer. Or it's not a good answer. So I don't want to give you a good answer. We'll say an exercise in humility. It's okay to say, I don't know. It's okay to say, I don't know. So the Gemara says, hence they both keys are to my Bezdin. I ask what's going on over here. Velo kashya, kan bekafats, kan b'shelo kafats. So this is incredible. So I will say, one is talking about a case of kafats. Now I will say, now what's the case of kafats? Kafats, we'll say, is where the plaintiff essentially springs into action and adjures the defendant before Beis Din has a chance to do so. If you look at Rashi says over here, kan bekafats, bereisha diktani meshalim kishakafats zeh v'yishbiu kodim shechayvu Beis Din. So I'll say it's here where the plaintiff goes ahead and kind of like says to he jumps into action, says to the defendant, do you swear? And the defendant says, yes, I swear. So it's in Beis Din, but what happened? But it's not the normal way that a shvuah is administered in Beis Din. So such an oath does not have the same teeth. Right? Kan bekafas, kan b'shelo kafas. So ultimately, I will say, so therefore, what are we talking about? When the plaintiff goes ahead and adjures the defendant in Beis Din, but before Beis Din really has the ability to do it, that'll be the case where even after a shvuah, you'll still have to pay. Because I will say the logic is that shvuah is not as strong. As opposed to when Beis Din administers the shvuah, and then the defendant takes the shvuah, then after that, we're done. After that, so what the Gemara is suggesting over here is that Rav's case, that a shvuah exempts you from further liability, is really a two-pronged shvuah. Number one, a shvuah that takes place, in Beis Din, and is administered by Beis Din. But a shvuah that takes place in Beis Din, but lamaisa again kafats, the plaintiff got all excited, all eager over here, and he kind of gets the defendant to swear on his own. It's a shvuah, it's definitely a shvuah, but lamaisa does not exempt the defendant from further liability. Very interesting. So the Gemara says, so we'll say, so listen to this. So Rabbi Shmuel says, I don't understand. Right? I don't understand. You don't hold of Rav. If you don't hold of Rav, why are you trying so hard to defend Rav? So I'm trying to really explain the position of Rav. That this is how Rav ultimately would explain the Mishnah. Rav kraka amar. But I will say, but one second. In other words, Rav's whole position. I guess remember again, Rav's position that once you take an oath, you are freed from further liability. Rav quotes a pasuk. Right? Remember again, v'lakach ba'alav v'lo yishalim. If Rav's quoting a pasuk, why does Rav's position need to be defended or explained? Amri kra l'chol nishban shemator nishban v'lo mishalman udasa. He explains that pasuk is in general talking about that any time that you take an oath, you don't have to pay. So the Gemara says, "V'lakach ba'alav lo yishalim misha alav l'shalim hu nishba." So he explains, I really think that pasuk is actually coming to teach something else, which is that who is the one who goes and takes, in general, in when there's a dispute, who is the one who takes the oath? The one who has to pay the money is generally the one upon whom the oath devolves. Master of Hamnun raised a kasha, hishpi alav chamisha pamim. But it's an interesting case. Let's say the defendant Ruvain was adjured 5 times. Whether ultimately again was the presence of Beis Din, not the presence of Beis Din, the kafar alav and Ruvain, we'll call him Ruvain, the kafar alav, and ultimately again Ruvain lied. He is chayiv for every single false oath. Rashi says chomesh va'asham. So he's chayiv for chomesh and asham for every single false oath. What's the reason for that? Since he has the ability to go ahead and be modeh, therefore Allah they'll be carrying in chomesh liability for each false oath. I will say, but in this case over here, In this case over here, you can't explain it like we said before as a case of kafatz, as a case of where the plaintiff went ahead and was eager and adjured the defendant. So the Gemara says hishpia alav ketani, because it says hishpia alav. Hishpia alav sounds like the Beis Din is administering the oath. Chutz leBeis Din l'matzah samers. Furthermore, you can't claim that this is a case of chutz leBeis Din. Why? So the Gemara says bifnei Beis Din katani. It says that it's happening in front of Beis Din. So hu mosav lava hu mefarek la litzadin katani. So he raised the question and he answers the question. We have to explain these cases individually. Hishpia alav, the case of Hishpia alav, chutz leBeis Din, be'ube Beis Din kafatz. Okay, so the case of Osef Hishpia alav will have to be a case of chutz leBeis Din, and the case of in Beis Din ultimately is talking about a case of kafatz. Fine. Massive Rav raised the kasha. Balabai shetan tainas ganav b'pikadon. So if the Balabai is, he claimed tainas ganav b'pikadon. So again, same case we had before. Shimon deposited the object with Ruvain, and what happens? It comes collected from Ruvain. Ruvain claims, I'm so sorry, it was stolen. It was stolen. So what's the halacha? V'nishpa, Ruvain swore it was stolen. V'hoda, and now Ruvain admits that he swore falsely. Ubo edim. Oh, okay. It was when it rains it pours. And then witnesses came along and said that Ruvain had the pikadon. Ruvain lied. Okay, so what's happened? So what do we do over here? Imach lo ba edim hoda b'shaim karen v'chomesh v'asham. If Ruvain admitted that he swore falsely before the witnesses showed up, then what's his liability? Three-pronged liability for swearing falsely. Karen, Chomesh, Asham. If, however, before he admitted that he swore falsely, right? And witnesses came first, and only then did he go ahead and admit. Mishalem tashlume kefel va'asham. He goes ahead and he pays kefel for being a ganav, right? For being a ganav, and ultimately goes ahead and has to bring an asham as well. So we'll say, by the way, it's interesting to hear the case over here. It's an interesting case. So again, the same case we kind of had before, but again, Shimon deposits the object with Ruvain, comes to collect objects from Ruvain. Ruvain says, I'm sorry, it was it was stolen. It was stolen. Shimon says, no problem, swear that it was stolen. Ruvain swore that it was stolen. Witnesses now come along and now Ruvain admits that he swore falsely, and witnesses come along that he stole the object. So what's his liability? So everything depends on the timing of the admission and the witnesses. If admission comes before witnesses, then Ruvain will be chayiv, three-pronged liability, Karen, Chomesh, Asham. If witnesses come first, then he's a confirmed thief. As a confirmed thief, kefel. Now he'll also have to pay asham because he swore falsely. Okay, so the Gemara says, so now let's analyze. So the Gemara says, good. V'hacha chutz leBeis Din. They both say this has to be a case of chutz leBeis Din. The kafatz lo matzis amras, and you can't. If it's outside of Beis Din, you can't really claim kafatz. Because they both say that case of the plaintiff adjuring the defendant, bepashtos is inside a Beis Din, and therefore amrit. So the Gemara says, lo matzi amrit kefal katani. Yet again, there's a kefal case. It's a kefal case. El amarava kol hoda loshna. So we'll say, so Rava says like this: any case of hoda, any case of where there was an admission of wrongdoing, loshna toin tainas avad, for loshna toin tainas ganav. It doesn't matter if he claims it was lost. Doesn't claim if he claims it was stolen. So the Gemara says, Lo Omer Rav. So Rav would not hold of this idea. I was about to say Rav's principle that once you swear you no longer have to pay. So the Gemara is suggesting over here doesn't apply. Even Rav would agree that it doesn't apply in a case where he's tining, where he's claiming that it was lost or it was stolen. Siv v'hisvada, because the pasuk in that case says he admitted debayi shalume karen v'chomesh, because you have to pay karen and chomesh. So toin tainas ganav ba'edim nami lo Omer Rav. So Rav would also not make his claim in a case of toin tainas ganav, where Ruvain claims that the object was stolen, and then witnesses came that that's not true. The siv tashlume kefal, because that's a case of kefal. So ki ka'amar. So when does Rav say his case? Kigon shetan tainas avad v'nishba for the hoda uba edim. In a case, for example, where Ruvain claims the object was lost, he swore that it was lost, He swore that it was lost. He did not admit that he swore falsely. And then witnesses come. That's the case where Rav says that since he swore already, he is freed from any liability. Azor Rav Gamda, Vamar L'Shmaite Kamei de Rav Ashi. So Rav Gamda came along, took this position, said for Rav Ashi. Amarle Hashta Umar Rav Hamnuna Talmidei de Rav Viyada de Amar Rav Hoda v'Kamosiv Hoda. So we'll say Rav Hamnuna, who is the Talmud of Rav, and ultimately again he knows about the position of Rav, and yet he answers ultimately again in the case of Hoda Va'at Amrit Hoda lo, and you're claiming that Rav's position, right, even in the case of Hoda doesn't apply. Amar Va'at Amrit, Va'at Amrit Hoda lo Amar Rav, that in the case of where he admits it, Rav's position doesn't apply. It doesn't make any sense. His own Talmud is saying it does. Amar Rav Ashi, Rav Hamnuna Hachika Kashle. This was Rav Hamnuna's problem. We'll say Amad Beis. I Amrit Bishlama Nishba. Ultimately, again, if you say in a case where he swore Ki Asu Eidim Mechayvu, and then when witnesses come, he's going to be liable. That's why we all go ahead and we obligate him in a karban for the latter shvuah, since he has the ability to admit that he owes. But if you say that even when witnesses come, he's going to be pater, is there such a case of, I'll say where we would say that if witnesses come and go ahead and testify about him, that he would be exempt from payment. So he's going to be pater on payment, but we're going to create carbonic liability for the shvuah. That doesn't make any sense. Since he has the ability in the future to go ahead and admit, hashta miha lo odi. At the end of the day, here he has not yet admitted any kind of liability. So we'll say, so what we are left with over here, interestingly enough, is a statement to Rabbi say this entire Amud Aleph was devoted ultimately to defining the parameters ultimately of the statement of Rav. What did Rav teach us? Rav said Shimon goes over to Ruvain, right? Shimon deposited an object to Ruvain. Ruvain, give me back my pikadon, right? Or I should say, I take that back. It doesn't have to be a pikadon, right? It's that Ruvain, right? Shimon lent money to Ruvain. Ruvain, give me back my money. Ruvain says, what's Ruvain's claim? Ruvain says, I don't have anything of yours, and Ruvain swears to that effect. And then what happens? Witnesses come and say, Ruvain, you lied. What's the halacha? The halacha is Ruvain is pater. Now I will say, why is Ruvain pater? Ruvain is pater because at the end of the day, he, so to speak, when Shimon asks for repayment, Shimon is entitled to one of two things, either money or a shvuah. Once Ruvain proffered up the shvuah, we are done. The machlokes ultimately for the rest of the daf are really the parameters in terms of when that halacha actually applies. But I will say that is the position of Rav. We'll see about the halacha l'maisa in that case. So I will say, so right now we're up to two dramatic nuggets of halacha l'maisa. One, the statement of Rav Sheshes, that when Ruvain has a pikadon, and ultimately Ruvain goes ahead and is kofer, says, I don't have the pikadon, or I gave you back the pikadon, and then what happens? And then he swears, v'nishpa alav. I'm sorry, even not finished balav. Right? Ruvain goes ahead and he says, I don't have the pikadon. He becomes a gazlan, and therefore is chayiv and owns him. Whatever his relationship with the object was before, it doesn't really matter. Now he is chayiv for everything. That's halacha nugget number one, Rav Sheshes. Halacha nugget number two is Rav. Shimon goes over to Ruvain, give me back the money you owe me. Ruvain says, I don't have anything, and he swears. The moment he proffers up the shvuah, he is no longer obligated to pay money. Those are the two pieces we're operating with right now. Let's go weiter. Says if a person claims ultimately, so again, Shimon deposited an object with Ruvain. Ruvain claims, I don't have it anymore. It was stolen. Okay, and Abba say it turns out that Ruvain is a liar. So if Ruvain is a liar, he's a ganav. As a ganav, what does he have to pay? Kefal. So Abba say this is not a case of a shvuah. There's no oath over here. Just good old-fashioned lying, right? It's good to get back to a good old-fashioned lying case, right? So Ruvain just simply like, I don't have it. Turns out that he does have it. He's a ganav. He has to pay kefal. Tavachu machar. If he slaughtered it and sold it, we will say blast from the past. He has to pay 4 and 5 time penalty payment. Why? Hoil the ganav mishan tashlumi kefal. Now, the Gemara says, since he stole it, he has to pay kefel. And ultimately, again, if you go ahead, right, if you have a pikadon and you claim that it was stolen from you, and in fact you're the ganav, you pay kefel. Fine. So the Gemara says, Ma ganav shumashalim kefel. So we'll say by a case of a ganav who pays kefel, tavachu machar mashayim tashlum arba v'chamisha. So and it will say again, if a ganav, a typical ganav, steals something, he's chayiv kefel for the act of theft. If he then subsequently slaughters it and steals it, he's chayiv arba v'chamisha for the slaughtering and stealing. Okay. Af toin tainas ganav. So Tzabosa, if a person, in this case over here, remember again, the object came to Ruvain's hands legally, right? Remember, Ruvain didn't start out as a ganav. How did he start out? As a shomer. So now we'll say now Ruvain the shomer, when Shimon comes to claim the object, what is Ruvain saying? It was stolen from me. We'll say this is what we learned about this extensively. This is called toin tainus ganov. I'm claiming that it was stolen from me. Ruvain is claiming that it was stolen from him. So the Gemara says, af toin tainas ganav bepikadon. So too again, when Ruvain claims that the bill was stolen from him, kishumashayim tashlumei kefel, he pays kefel. So remember again, he's claiming that it was stolen from him. Now it turns out that he lied, right? It wasn't stolen from him. So he pays kefel for the act of theft. And if Ruvain didn't just steal it, he didn't just keep the pikadon, but what? He slaughtered and sold it, he pays 4 and 5 time penalty payments. So also what the Gemara is effectively demonstrating is toin tainas ganav, claiming, right, being a shomer over an object, and then claiming that it was stolen from you, essentially makes you a ganav, and you have the same level of liability. All right, so the Gemara said, one second, below shavua, shlo b'shavua. I will say, and here's what's interesting. Remember, a ganav pays kefel even without an oath, right? Ruvain steals an object from Shimon. Ruvain is discovered, witnesses come along, and they say, hey, you stole the object. Okay, so Ruvain's a ganav, he pays kefel, even if without a shavua. Tomar between tainas ganav shem mishayim tashlumei ela b'shavua. We'll say, but here's the problem. Toin tainas ganav pays, ultimately goes ahead and pays kefel, right? Or I should say doesn't, sorry. Tomar between tainas ganav shem mishayim tashlumei kefel ela b'shavua. We'll say, here's the interesting part. In the case of a shomer, right, toin tainas ganav only pays with a shvua, right? When Ruvain ultimately again is a shomer and then claims that he doesn't have the object, it turns out that he stole it. The obligation for kefel and later on Abra v'chamisha only sets in if he swore falsely. So the hekesh is not good. Amri hekeshehi. The Gemara says it's a hekesh ve'in mashivin al hekesha. And ultimately again you can't offer up objections on a legitimate hekesh. Rashi says over here hekeshehu the iskish ganav v'toin tanas ganav the smichi kraya adadi. They both say there's a scriptural juxtaposition, and when a scriptural juxtaposition is a legitimate exegetical method. But that was an excellent sentence, no? Right? Right? A scriptural juxtaposition is a legitimate exegetical. I forgot already. A legitimate exegetical process. Legitimate exegetical. Zach, right? So Lemaisa, therefore you can't go ahead and really ask a question on it. So we'll say, so I understand if you tell me that there are two psukim, right? Two psukim. See, if you say that one pasuk is talking about Ganov and one pasuk is talking about Toin Tainas Ganov, then that makes sense. And therefore the hekesh, the juxtaposition tells me that the halachos that apply to one apply to the other. Now here's what's interesting. Even though there are different processes, right? For a Ganov, the way it works for a good old Ganov is how Ruvain steals an object from Shimon. Then what happens? Witnesses come and say, Ruvain stole an object from Shimon. What's the halacha? He's a ganav. What's the halacha as a ganav? What's the halacha? Kefel. And if he subsequently slaughtered and stole them, what's the halacha? Arba v'chamisha. That pasuk is juxtaposed to Toin Tanis. What's Toin Tanis Ganav? Shimon deposited an object with Ruvain. Now what happens? Shimon comes to her back. Ruvain says, so sorry, it was stolen. And he swears, because remember, you need a shvua by Toin Tanis Ganav. He swears. It turns out that what? He swore falsely. Witnesses come along and say Ruvain stole it. What's the halacha? Now Ruvain's a ganav. As a ganav, what's the halacha? As a ganav, what's the halacha? Kefel. And if he subsequently slaughtered it and stole it, he be chayiv arba v'chamisha. So the Gemara says this hekish makes sense, right? The comparison makes sense if you hold that pasuk A is talking about ganav and pasuk B is talking about toin tanas ganav. Elaman da'amar. We'll say first wide line. Elaman, according to the opinion that says. Hi, imi matzi aganov. Vim lo yimatzi tarvaya betoin tainas ganav ma'ikalameimar. So I will say ultimately again, But if y'all, that both psukim are talking about Toin Tainus Ganav, then what is there to say? Amri Ganav Haganov. So we'll say in that case we'd have to say ultimately again the double lashon of Ganav Haganov teaches me both cases as well. So we'll have to stop over here for today. Shkoyach, we did great. We really good job everyone. Right? We did good. We covered a lot of ground. We have a short Amud Aleph. Rav Kalman Akiva is going to be giving Shir Mirat Hashem tomorrow on Shabbos. I left him only with a short Amud Aleph. He will be great to Mirat Hashem. Let's say Shkoyach. Good Shabbos. All right, Chevron Zoom, good Shabbos, everyone. Good Shabbos, good Shabbos.